Are you hiding your talent? Are you afraid you will fail? How to overcoming the fear of failure. Please join us for this insightful lesson.
Welcome to the Blue Springs Church of Christ. Our speaker today is Donald Gelles. Be sure to check out our website, www.bluespringscofc.org.
Let me welcome everybody here again this morning, and I do want to mention those who are watching us on the internet. We're glad that you are with us as well. Just real quick for tonight's lesson, we're going to be talking about God's desire, and God's desire is you. So let me encourage everyone to be back tonight as we have another opportunity to worship God. We're talking this morning about hiding your talents. In essence, we're talking about the fear of failure. And I've taken as my text this morning Matthew chapter 25, and we'll look at verses 14 through 30. Matthew 25, 14 through 30. For the kingdom of heaven, verse 14, for the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went out on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Verse 20. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents beside you. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed, so you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Let me give you 2 things real quick about that passage. The first one is, if you go back up to the beginning, I want you to notice that each person received a talent based on their ability. Nobody was given more by the servant than what he thought they could handle. Right? So he told the servants, I'm going to give you what you can work within your ability. The second thing is at the end, there's a consequence for what was done with the talent. Now we look at the 2 who had gained more and we think, well, this is good. We look at the one who did nothing to profit his master and we see the consequences of doing nothing. And he says all of this is based on the fact that he says, I was afraid. Let me ask you this. What fear is keeping you from using your talents? It's a play on words, of course. What is it that you're afraid of so you're not doing? What is it that you've thought about? I wouldn't mind doing that, or I've given it some consideration, but, I might not succeed. I might fail at whatever that thing is that you want to do. So your option is to do nothing. Fear of failure prevents us from being the people that God knows we can be. Remember, he gave each of his servants according to what he felt they could do. What has God given you, and what are you doing with it? I want to highlight a couple of things while we have our time together this morning, and I want you to notice what fear of failure does to us as individuals. Here's the first thing. Fear of failure takes away your talent to be salt. Go over to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, and look at verse 13. It says this, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." If we're afraid to be the salt that we need to be, in fact, Jesus is calling us to do that which he knows we can do. You can be salt, right? You can use this talent. You can be salt. You can have an influence in the world with those around you. But fear of failure says, I'm not going to do that. Fear of failure says that I'm going to take whatever salt I have and I'm going to keep it to myself. Or maybe we could continue with the parable of the talents and say, I'm just going to bury my talent in the ground. Go over to Mark. Turn forward in your Bible. Go to Mark chapter 9. And I want you to notice what's recorded in verse 50, the last verse in that chapter. It says this, "Salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another." There's three things in that one verse. The first one is the understanding that salt is good. Well, we understand that salt is good because that's what we're called to be, to flavor and to season. The second thing is if we lose our salt, if we lose our flavor, it's not a good thing. How can we get it back? And then the third thing is this, have salt in yourselves. You be the flavor you can be, and I'll be the flavor that I can be. I'm not working with your salt, and you're not working with my salt. You're not given my talent, and I'm not given your talent. Each of us is called to work according to our ability. What are you doing with your ability? Are you working with the things that have been given, or is that fear of failure preventing you from being the seasoning that the world so desperately needs? Go over, let me give you one more. Go over to Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. And I want to begin in verse 34. Luke 14 and verse 34. Salt is good. Does this sound a little familiar to you? But if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Sound a little familiar to you? It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Losing our flavor makes us a people that have no advantage. Losing our flavor and our ability because we're afraid. What if I get out there and somebody rejects the seasoning that I am? What if I get out there and somebody says, I don't want the seasoning that you are? It causes us to be a people that are fit for nothing. The words that Jesus uses here, neither fit for land nor the dunghill. Now, I don't know anybody that would want that to be a description of who they are in the presence of God. Fear of failure means that we're not the salt that we need to be. Here's a second thing. Fear of failure takes away your talent to be light. Go back to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, and this time look at verse 14. Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." A city on a hill can't be hidden because it's lit. I saw this, and you've probably seen it as well. It's like a nighttime image of America, and you can see literally the outline of America based on where the lights are in the nation. You know, of course, the East Coast is lit up real bright, and then there's the West Coast, and it's lit. And then you can see throughout the middle of the country the outline where these different things are lit. Those things are seen because there's lights. Are you being seen as a light? I mean, people are looking, church. People are looking towards us, and they're wanting to see whether we're going to be a light that offers them guidance or whether we're going to take the light that we are and we hide it. Fear of failure says, I don't want anybody looking at me. Fear of failure says, let me go ahead and try to blend in with all those around me so that I don't stand out like that city on a hill. Go over, you're in Matthew, turn forward to 1 Peter. Go over to 1 Peter chapter 2, and let me give you just verse 12. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 12. It says this, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. It matters the type of light that we are. It matters how people see us. And here the understanding that Peter is talking about is that the conduct that we do, the light that we're showing, have that shine bright among the Gentiles. So even if somebody speaks bad against you, they're going to be, and they're saying you're an evildoer, they're going to be able to see your good works. They're going to be able to see your light, and they'll say that person represents God. And they'll glorify God because of the light that you are. And I know we probably don't always think about it that way. And I think about the times, listen, when I wasn't a good light. I think about the times when I wasn't shining the way that I needed to shine, or I was trying to hide who I was as a New Testament Christian, and it was to no advantage. It didn't help me, and it didn't help those around me. Go over to 1 Timothy, turn backward in your Bible, go to 1 Timothy chapter 4, and I want you to look at verse 12. 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12. Let no one despise your youth, Paul is writing to Timothy, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity. What type of example are you to those around you? Are you an example of faithfulness? Are you an example of making worship a priority? Are you an example of making prayer a priority? Are you an example of being that light that you need to be so that even your brothers and sisters in Christ, when they see you and encounter you, can say, I know that light. I recognize that light. I know that individual. That's brother or sister so-and-so. And they're serving God to the best of their ability. But fear of failure robs us of that. Fear of failure says, I don't want people to look at me, but we're called to be looked at. Fear of failure says, I want to just kind of hide from the world, but we're called to stand out in the world. A light on a hill, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Fear of failure says, whatever I need to do and steps that I need to take, even if it will do something that won't bring glory to God, I'm going to hide who I am. Fear of failure makes us take that talent and we bury it in the ground. Nobody's talent was given to be buried. Nobody's. Here's the third thing. Fear of failure takes away your talent of voice. It takes away your talent of voice. Go over to Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8, and I want you to look at verse 4. Let me set the background for you. Jerusalem is being persecuted. People are dying because they are New Testament Christians, and there's a great persecution. And it says of that persecution that people were scattered. They went everywhere. Now, there's some decisions that these people are going to have to make. They left persecution, and to avoid persecution, they could be scattered and blend in. They could allow fear of failure to say, well, wherever we go, whenever we get there, don't say the things that we were saying in Jerusalem, because that's just going to get us in trouble again. They could have done that with their talent, but they didn't. It says, therefore, those who were scattered, verse 4, went everywhere preaching the word. I know it got us in trouble in Jerusalem, but I'm going to preach it in Galatia. I know it got me in trouble in Jerusalem, but I'm going to preach it in Corinth or Thessalonica or Ephesus or anywhere that I find myself going because of this persecution. Fear of failure says, don't say anything. Fear of failure robs us of our voice to be able to say, let me tell you about my God. Let me tell you what my God can do. Not only what he's done for me, but let me tell you what my God can do for you. Go over to 1 Peter turn back to 1 Peter, go to chapter 3, and look at verse 15. 1 Peter 3 and verse 15. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. We don't have the option of being silent. Now, that doesn't mean that at times we don't wish we did, but we don't have the option of being silent. Fear causes us to put that on the table. Fear causes us to say, well, if things get too bad, or if people begin to notice that there's something different about me, I'll just quiet my voice down and I'll kind of blend in. That's not an option that we've ever been given. In fact, just the opposite of that is true. We're to be ready to give an answer. This voice that we have, we're ready to say to those why we have this hope that is in us. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Let me tell you about my God. Let me tell you about what he has done in my life. Let me give you an answer. Go back to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 4. And in verse 2, 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2, I want you to notice the instruction that Paul gives to Timothy. He says, preach the word. Now, I'll go on and give me just a second. He tells him something very specific. Timothy, use your voice. Timothy, don't let fear of failure rob you of the things that need to be said. And he goes on and he says it this way, be ready in season and be ready out of season. What you need to be ready to do with your voice is convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. You know what that means? Some people don't want to hear our voice. It's true, brethren. Some people don't want to hear our voice. And if we're not careful, we allow fear to rob us of our voice. And in essence, we allow others to not hear what they need to hear. The gospel needs to be preached. You see, your faith needs to be shared. That's just the way it is. We don't want to take that talent of our voice and say, let me just bury it as deep down as I possibly can so that nobody hears from me. That's just fear talking. Let me give you another example of what fear of failure does. Fear of failure takes away your talent to bear fruit. It takes away your very life. I want you to go over to Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5, and look beginning in verse 22. It says this, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. And those who are Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, remember, the fruit of the Spirit is, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. How we live is a talent. The things that we manifest in our life as fruit absolutely matter. Now, I'll suggest to you something that you already know about fruit. It's good in two ways. Fruit, one, is good to eat. We take it and we consume it. Christian fruit is good for others to consume it, to be able to see that love and that joy and that peace. Those are things that help people. The long-suffering, the kindness, the goodness, the faithfulness, the gentleness, the self-control. Those are things that when that fruit is produced, people are blessed by that fruit. But here's another aspect of it. Fruit blesses the one on which it's growing. Fruit blesses the vine. That fruit is being produced because it's connected to that vine. You're the vine. And you are encouraged by that fruit as well. You're strengthened by that fruit. You gain maturity because of that fruit. You're nourished because of that fruit. So it goes in two directions, toward you and towards others. But if we're afraid, if we take this talent of producing fruit in our life and we say, let me hide all these things, the love, the joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, let me take these things and hide it. Tell me what benefit that fruit is. And could we really say that we're producing fruit? Verse 25, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Fear of failure says, that's not how I'm going to walk. Fear of failure says, that's not the person that I'm willing to be. Let me give you a verse you might not think about. Go over to 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 1, and go down to verse 5. 1 Peter 1 and verse 5. Let me go down to verse 11. 1 Peter 1, 5 through 11. It says this, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice. Now listen, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love. Though now you do not see him, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Of this salvation, verse 10, the prophets have inquired and searched carefully, who prophesied out of the grace that would come to you, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ who was in them was indicating when he testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. Life isn't always easy to produce fruit. Fruit at times comes with great struggle. Sometimes we're planted in some rough soil, and it takes time to produce the fruit that we need to do. Sometimes we find ourselves trying to grow and struggle to grow, and we know it's hard, but because we're believing, look at verse 8. Though you do not see him, yet believing, you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory. We're a people who know that fruit is possible, right? So we have to be long-suffering. We have to know that there's a joy at the end of the road. I always say it this way, all the effort is worth it in the end. I mean, it's hard right now, but it's worth it in the end. Every farmer who's going to plow whatever field it is has to begin with the first row. Has to begin. And he looks at that field and he sees, my goodness, that's 1,000 acres. That's 3,000 acres. And what do I have? I've begun on the first row, but he continues. He works. He makes the effort. He does what's required because he understands that in the end, something can be produced. That's us. Brethren, that's us. We begin that process because we understand that in the end, something can be produced. Inexpressible, Peter says, and full of glory, receiving, verse 9, the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. If we're a people who are going to receive salvation, we have to be bearing fruit. Nobody is going to receive salvation without fruit upon that vine. Listen, I know that sounds hard, but hear me, church, that's the way it is. Fear says, I'm not going to produce. Fear says the soil is just too hard. I mean, other people have easier soil and they're producing fruit one after another, but they don't realize how hard my soil is and how hard it is to produce in this work environment or in this community or in this school or in this job or whatever it may be. They don't understand that my soil is more difficult. Fear of failure says, I'm not going to produce anything. Without fruit, there's no life. Without life, Peter says there's no salvation. Fear will literally rob us of our salvation. One more. One more. Fear of failure takes away your talent to love. Now, I want you to think about that. Go over to John, the Gospel of John, chapter 13, and look at verse 34. John 13 and verse 34. Jesus says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another." Now, the end result of that love just isn't vaporized into the atmosphere. The end result of that love is manifested. Notice what he says in verse 35. By this, what's the this? The love. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Fear of failure says, I'm not going to love. Fear of failure says, I'm not going to take that risk. And loving is a risk at times. How is the person going to receive it? How are they going to respond to me? What are they going to think about me? Is it going to be received in a way in which they're willing to say, well, you know what? I love this person back. I love this person as well. Or are they going to take the love that we're showing and say, you know what? I'm really not interested. Can I make this suggestion? Sharing the gospel, even when it's rejected, is a sign of love. Knocking on somebody's door to tell them about the gospel, even when that door is shut in our face, is a sign of love. We love that soul enough to say, let me tell you about Jesus Christ. Let me tell you about a man who not only changed my life, he's done that, but he's changed my eternity. Fear of love prevents us from stepping out there and being the person that we can be. Go over to the book of Romans chapter 12, and look at verse 9. Romans chapter 12 and verse 9. It says, let love be without hypocrisy. A modern day, let it be of good intent. Let it be pure. Let it be good. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. You see, that's not love. Cling to what is good. There's love. So we want to let love be without hypocrisy. We don't want to allow those things. We want to abhor those things that are evil, and we want to cling to those things that are good. Fear of love prevents us from using the talent that we have to express to others the concern and the care that we have for them. I know this sounds a little odd because of how we view discipline at times, but church discipline is a sign of love. It really is. It's a sign. It needs to be done properly. It needs to be done out of a spirit of concern, a spirit of love, but it is a form of love. And sometimes we don't think about it that way because we think if somebody loves us, they're never going to say anything that challenges us. But that's not true. Because I love somebody, sometimes I've got to challenge what they're doing. Fear of love says, I don't want to say anything or do anything because then the person's not going to like me. Sometimes we have to step out in faith and love, even if somebody's going to say to us, well, I'm not interested in you anymore. I'm not interested in having you as a part of my life. Go over to 1 Thessalonians. You're in Romans. Turn forward. Go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 and look at verse 12. 1 Thessalonians 3 and verse 12. And may the Lord make you increase and abound in love. Now notice the direction, and may the Lord make you increase and abound in love to one another and to all, just as we do to you, so that he may establish your hearts blameless in holiness before our God and Father at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ with all his saints. Verse 13 doesn't exist in a vacuum. Verse 13 is a natural outcome of verse 12. Verse 12 is dealing with love. Verse 13 has an expression, has a manifestation that's based on love. And may the Lord make you increase and abound in love. Love isn't something that we keep to ourselves. It's something that we share with others. Love is something that we're willing to say because others need what I've enjoyed. Who's ever said, I'm full with all the love I need. I really don't need people to express any more love to me. I mean, my tank is full. I don't know any honest person. Come on. I don't know any honest person who would ever say, I've got enough love in my life. We're the opposite. Give me more. I can take more. I crave more. I need more. Fear of failure takes that talent to love and it buries it in the ground where we become cold, unfeeling, unemotional. Now, hear me. I know sometimes, even when we say something in love, even when it needs to be said, that person doesn't always receive it that way, but it shouldn't prevent us, because we love them, of saying what needs to be said. One final one. Fear of failure takes away your talent to obey. Fear of failure takes away your talent to obey. Look at John. The Gospel of John, chapter 14, Jesus is the one who's speaking, and he says this in verse 15. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Now, John 14 and verse 15 is one of those verses where the rubber meets the road, or it's putting your money where your mouth is. So Jesus says, if you love me, if that's your confession, if that's who you're going to be, if that's what you're going to espouse, he says, keep my commandments. That's a manifestation of our love for God. We obey. Fear allows us to take that talent to obey, and we hide from it. We run from it. We don't manifest it. I mean, we know that it's required. We understand that we have to obey, but we don't want to do it, and we become rebellious. Yet we still want to make the claim, of course I love Jesus, but I'm not obeying him. Of course I love Jesus, but I'm not doing the very things that he asked me to do. Of course I love God. Well, then am I obeying God? Not just in those things that are easy. Come on now, that's not hard. But am I obeying God in those things that are difficult for me? And brethren, there are things that are difficult for us. Am I willing to say that I want to use my talent to obey, even when I have to change things in my life? Even when I have to make a change that's going to allow me to free myself up to obey when I need to obey. Go over to James. I know this is familiar to you. James chapter 1, and go just to verse 22. James 1 and verse 22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone, verse 23, is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks intently into the perfect law of liberty, that's looking into the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the gospel. He who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. A doer is blessed when he does. Fear takes that talent of obedience and it buries it in the ground and says, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to remain here. Think about the life of Paul for a minute. Think of all the hardships that Paul suffered, all the things that he went through, being beat, being threatened with death, being in shipwreck, being in trouble from the Gentiles as well as the Jews. Paul could have easily said, forget this obedience thing. All it does is get me in trouble. But Paul said, I'll obey till I die. You see, fear of failure prevents us from saying that. Fear of failure says, I'm not going to obey if it's going to cost me what I think is too much. Let me remind you of something. Being a Christian is going to cost you absolutely everything. It's down there in the small print when you got baptized. Maybe you didn't see it. Maybe you overlooked it or you didn't read it. But in the very small print, it tells you that it's going to require everything. It's going to cost you absolutely everything. If being a Christian isn't costing you something, you're not a very good Christian, are you? Jesus talked about talents. And he talked about those who are given talents and they did good. But the focus of the parable comes down to the one person who was given a talent and he buried it in the ground. What are you burying in the ground? I gave you a couple examples. What other talents do you have that you're saying I'm not using? Why not begin to use those things? Why not begin to produce those things? Why not begin to enjoy the fruit that comes from those things? Are you afraid or are you using your talents? Listen, if we can encourage you this morning, we'd like to do that. I think we can do it by two ways. We can pray with you. We can pray for you. Maybe there's something that you need the congregation to help you with. Would you give us the opportunity to do that, to stand by your side and to encourage you and help you with whatever that situation or that circumstance may be? We'd love to do that. If any are here this morning and you're not a New Testament Christian, would you please consider obeying that plan of salvation to hear, believe, repent, confess, and to be baptized? It's printed every week in your bulletin. If you're watching us online, and we have so many people that are faithful and tuning in and watching us online, or they're watching this as a recording, have you obeyed the gospel plan of salvation? If not, you need to get in contact with us so we can teach you. Listen, friends, if you're subject to the invitation, would you come forward as we stand and sing?
Come to Jesus, he will save you. Though your sin that crimson blow, if you give your heart to Jesus, he will make it white as snow. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come today.